At last, the whisper that has been circling the edges of your knowing comes forward into the light. And chosen ones, listen closely now. On August 18th, there will be a doorway opened, not by thunder or by billboard, but by the soft, familiar voice of the person who has always been closest to you. And that is precisely why you must not speak a single word, not because you are being asked to silence yourself out of fear or shame, but because the intimacy that has been your refuge will, for a brief and sacred moment, become the vessel through which your deepest lessons are administered. Understand this clearly. The most potent tests do not arrive as enemies at the gate, but as hands that once held yours, as the tone of an old friend's greeting, as a glance that carries the weight of unfinished stories. And when those familiar channels are used to press an old button, you will find your nervous system tight before your mind can catch up, your throat hot with rebuttal before logic gathers its evidence. And in that split second, you stand at a crossroads between repeating a pattern that keeps you small and stepping into a new pattern that preserves your frequency. And so I tell you plainly, chosen ones, that silence on that day is not passivity. It is sovereignty. Silence is not surrender, it is strategy. Silence is not absence of voice. It is the voice of a person who has learned to steward attention, who recognizes that every utterance carries energetic currency, and who will not spend that currency on rehashing old wounds or on proving what their heart already knows. Before you object in your mind, the silence will be misread. The silence will be interpreted as weakness or indifference. Hear this deeper truth. The truth that lives inside you does not require constant explanation to those who are not yet ready to receive it, and the very act of sparing yourself an argument becomes an act of devotion. Devotion to your path, devotion to the work you are being prepared for, devotion to the life that will fit you when you no longer respond reflexively to every impulse to defend, correct, or justify. And so let us walk through this careful preparation together, with both tenderness and rigor, because the spiritual is practical and the practical is spiritual, and your competency in one will serve your integrity in the other. On the morning of August 18th, do not arrive at your day unarmed. Prepare as if you were stewarding a temple. Rise before the noise if you can, and spend 10 deliberate minutes in stillness. That is more than devotional ritual. Allow it to be a sealing of intention. Sit quietly. Place your hand over the center of your chest and breathe down into your belly 3 times to calibrate the nervous system. Speak aloud, softly, but with absolute conviction, a sentence such as, I will not be pulled into old time. Today, I will steward my energy. I will choose presence over reaction. Write this sentence, if you are able, on a small card and tuck it into your breast pocket or on your phone's lock screen, so that when the impulse to speak rises, you have a physical covenant to look at and remember. Hydrate, move slowly, ground by placing bare feet on the earth for 5 minutes if possible. For the body is the altar of the soul, and these small acts are sacramental. Do not underestimate them, because they inform the nervous system that you are safe in this body and that the quiet you will keep is active, not fearful. Understand also, chosen ones, that there are 2 kinds of silence, the kind that protects and preserves, and the kind that tolerates harm. Know the difference. The silence you are asked to keep on August 18th is the kind that preserves your frequency, the kind that lets heat pass through without feeding it, the kind that says, I will not be baited into recreating what I have already outgrown. It is not an invitation to allow abuse to continue unchallenged, nor is it permission to remain in situations of chronic betrayal. If the person closest to you crosses a line that repeatedly damages your dignity, then silence must be partnered with boundary. In that case, the silence of the moment is followed by decisive action. Step back, create space, set a firm but calm limit, and when appropriate, speak clearly later from a grounded place. Never confuse the protective pause with endless capitulation. The test itself will be subtle. It will be delivered in the tone more than the content, in a peripheral glance more than a direct accusation. Because when Venus slips into a reactive pattern, or when Mercury tangles with Mars, the cosmos conspires to make the trigger feel urgent, and the person who loves you most may unwittingly offer the opening. So you will sense a tightening in your shoulders, a quickness in your breath, a flood of old stories rising like smoke, and the primal voice inside you will shout, answer, correct, make the wound visible. But it is precisely in that first 5 seconds that the entire trajectory of your life can be altered. To speak is to be pulled back into schoolroom repetitions. To hold the silence is to graduate into a new posture of power, one that the heavens reward, not out of favor, but out of law. The law that energy moves where intention points, and that your ability to steward your energy signals to the universe that you are ready for higher stewardship. If you find this difficult to accept as ethical behavior toward your loved one, consider this. When someone is close enough to see your every crack, they will, at times, unknowingly prod the places that still need healing, not from malice, but from proximity. They are the vessel through which the cosmos shows you what remains unintegrated, and by not answering in force, you always reduce the likelihood of reifying the pattern for another cycle of hurt. By responding with the quiet, you interrupt the transmission. You become the one who shifts the pattern, and patterns shift families, lineages, and timelines. Therefore, your silence is not selfish. It is intergenerational liberation, practical. Steps will help. When the provocation comes, count inwardly to 7 before you react. Lengthen the exhale to double the inhale, or practice the anchor phrase under your breath, something like, not now, not like this, so your mouth is busy with breath and not with argument. Have a single postrigo practice. If after the exchange you feel unsettled, take 3 deliberate steps away from the scene and find a place to write for 5 to 10 minutes. Name each emotion as it appears on the page without explanation: anger, hurt, old jealousy, shame, fear. Naming is a quiet extraction of the poison. Then fold the page and either keep it for your own healing or burn it as a symbolic release, whichever resonates with your soul. If you are someone who journalizes, create a ritual entry that night, not to reconstruct the argument, but to translate the experience into lessons. What did the trigger reveal about what is still tender within you? What did the person's words show you about expectations you still hold? What boundary might be set in love to protect your future self? The goal of these practices is not to harden your heart, but to refine it, to teach you how to carry intimacy without returning to defensiveness. There will be voices in your head that warn you that silence equates to dishonesty, that withholding speech is a lie, that truth must always be proclaimed. To those voices, say this: truth is not only a sequence of words, it is a living resonance. And sometimes the truest thing you can express is restraint, for restraint contains testimony about your inner maturity. In this restraint there is dignity, the dignity of one who refuses to trade spiritual ascent for momentary vindication. Yet, understand as well the subtle art of timing. Silence is often temporary and strategic. You might, in the days after the Calcium Like Cold of August 18th. Choose to convene a different conversation, one that is scheduled, sacred, and held in a container where both parties have had time to settle for a real exchange. Choose your time, tone, and place with the same care you would choose a sacred text. Speak then to repair, not to harm. And if the person who triggered you is capable of understanding, use your words not to punish, but to translate the event into a request. When you said X, I felt Y when you do Z. I need boundary B. Will you agree to this? If they respond defensively, do not take their defensiveness as your failure. Some people can only meet you slowly. If they meet you in kindness, you will both be elevated. If they cannot, you will both be clarified. You may worry, will I lose connection? The answer is not simple, for the universe often prunes what will not grow into the next season. Some relationships will endure the new you, and some will not. This is not a judgment, but a natural thinning that allows healthier soil for what is to come. There is a sovereignty to letting go. You release not from cruelty, but from fidelity to your own becoming. You might also ask whether the specificity of the date matters. Why August 18th? Listen, while the cosmos does not always deliver its curriculum by calendar, there are moments when astrological aspects and human readiness align, and when the weather of our inner life finds a tipping point. August contains its own seasonal density, and for many, the middle of the month carries a test. But beyond astrology, know that any day you decide to steward your energy can become your day of graduation. The date becomes a symbol, a marker in your story. In choosing to treat August 18th as such a marker, you give yourself a rehearsal for every future moment, when you must conserve your voice and expend your energy with deliberate purpose. Now let us imagine aloud the scene. You are in a kitchen or a living room, or perhaps on the threshold of a front door, and someone known to you says something that lands like a pebble thrown into the most still pond you thought you had cultivated. Concentric rings of old shame ripple outward. Your first inclination is to answer quickly, to stitch back the old garment of defense, because historically that quickness has offered you a brief sense of safety. But when you choose silence, you allow the rings to pass without adding friction. Years from now, you will look back and say, that day you did not defend yourself, you did not let a ledger be kept against you. You let the ledger close by not writing on it again. Some of you will say, that sounds mercenary, to keep silence for a reward. And indeed, there is a subtle truth here. The reward is not the motive we seek, but when heaven aligns and doors open, it is not because you have been silent for performance, but because silence has trained you into new capacity. We do not act for favor, but there is an order, a return to the work of interior discipline. If you want a practical liturgy to hold you during the day, create one. Begin with breathwork, 4-4-8. Inhale for 4, hold for exhale for 8. This lengthens the exhale and calms the vagus nerve. Carry a grounding object, a small stone, a ring, a bracelet, and when you feel the urge to speak, let your fingers close around that object and name it silently as a sacrament. This is my promise to remain steady. If you are at work and an inciting remark happens over email, respond not in the heat but in scheduled calm. Draft nothing, step away, sleep on it. A single sentence typed the next day after reflection is often more powerful than paragraphs written in fury. The voice you cultivate when you are calm has a weight the furious voice never attains. And for those who fear isolation, remember that sacred silence is not the same as social silence. You will have companions, friends, people who understand and witness your process. Tell one trusted person your plan for August 18th, not to garner permission, but to create accountability, a human covenant that strengthens your resolve. If you are nervous about slipping, make a small environmental change. Plan to be in a place where you can step outside if you need space, or arrange for a brief walk post-interaction to recover your parasympathetic rhythm. Realize too that silence has a language: your posture, the steadiness of your eyes, the calm of your breath, the softness of your face. All of these communicate without words. You can be eloquent in stillness. There will be an inner teacher within you who will quietly applaud, the part of you that remembers many nights of healing, the part of you that has altered its reactions through work, the part of you that stands now not to be seen but to be true. Let that part speak louder than any external persuasion. If you do speak later, let it be an embodied speech, not a defensive monologue. Embodied speech flows from anchored presence. It is succinct, free of blame, rich in personal responsibility. It begins with I statements rather than you accusations, and it seeks resolution rather than triumph. Many of you are leaders in your families without titles. On August 18th, lead yourself by surrendering the compulsion to argue. Your quietness becomes a curriculum others may wish to emulate. When they see your steadiness, they will learn not to weaponize proximity as easily, for power teaches its own ethic. There is also a practical, spiritual discipline you might adopt, a small evening ritual of review and gratitude. At the end of August 18th, before sleep, spend 10 minutes in reflection. Note 3 ways the day invited you to grow, 3 instances where you successfully held silence or where you learned from a misstep, and 3 small acts of self-care you will commit to tomorrow. This ritual closes the loop and integrates the lesson. It is the difference between an experience passing through you, like weather, and becoming a change in the landscape of your soul. You may worry that in practicing such restraint you will be misunderstood as unfeeling, as detached. Remember that those who love you truly will hear you in the long breath you keep. They will watch the steady foundation of your life and learn respect for it, though perhaps slowly. For those who cannot wait, allow them to leave. Sometimes the removal of friction is itself a blessing for both parties. Finally, chosen ones, as you prepare for August 18th, remember the deepest reason for this discipline. You are not being asked to silence yourself in order to protect a fragile ego. You are being asked to silence the reactive self so that the creative self may speak through action rather than argument, through fidelity rather than reactivity, and through attraction rather than persuasion. The silence you keep is a seed planted in the soil of your lineage. It will germinate not by your force, but by constancy. When you stand at the end of that day and breathe, you will know whether you have kept to your promise, and if you have, a quiet shift will occur, small at first. Then, inevitable, opportunities will align. The people and projects worthy of your time will recognize your steadiness, and the life you are cultivating will begin to feel less like a series of skirmishes, and more like a deliberate, expansive unfolding. So go into that day not as someone holding their tongue out of fear, but as someone choosing a new language of power, the language of stillness, the language of measured breath, the language of anchored presence, the language that says plainly, without a single lifted voice, I am here, I am steady, and I will not spend my life defending the version of me that I have already outgrown.